Welcome to the Brand Nerd Podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Meador, the founder and top nerd of Brand Nerd, a marketing agency focused on branding, websites, and content marketing. On this podcast, we'll nerd out over the ever-evolving world of technology and how it can be harnessed to grow your small businesses. We'll talk to entrepreneurs, marketers, and tech experts to gain knowledge on how they've built their brands and how you can apply these lessons to your brand. Joining me today once again is Pete Rodriguez, a longtime collaborator and newly minted design director at Brand Nerd. We're going to talk about Pete's origin story and philosophy, how I'm using AI to superpower my work processes, and a new business venture that has us pumped. Join us as we explore these topics and gain valuable insights to elevate your brand. Let's get started. This is a significantly more pumped up production value, as in I took dozens of minutes to create a podcast intro, and later you're going to be receiving a podcast outro. But to start, Pete, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit. I feel like last time we just kind of talked and had a good time, but we didn't have a lot of pre-production or pre-planning going into it. So today, I want to talk to you about design and learn a little bit about your origin story, some of which I know and some of which I probably don't know.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Origin story sounds so superhero-esque.
Yeah.
Like,
so what were you doing before you were a designer?
yeah. Nothing. Honest question?
Yeah. No.
Before I was
Make up a story.
Yeah, it's funny. When did I to answer that question, you have to say, when did you become a designer? And that's a weird.
That's true.
Yeah, it's kind of ambiguous because you just sort of end up in the place that you are. But I would say specifically my first memories of designing are in high school, like actually sitting at a computer and designing stuff. So I had a couple design classes and always was into art. So I was like kind of not an artsy fartsy kind of kid, but like always drew and like would trace like, Dragon Ball Z characters and like all that stuff. So I had creativity. And then, yeah, so high school did classes. And then eventually I ended up at a 2-year like trade school for graphic design, studying that, graphic communications, and specifically like printing technology as well. So it was this cool mix of print, which is very tangible, and you actually have to work with your hands, and then design, which is like all on screen. So that is the short and sweet of.
So essentially, it was high school to
I don't know,
college, trade school, whatever you want to call it, and then straight into the field. Like,
So I worked at right out of school. I worked at a couple different places, but I did like a leadership program at a church.
Oh yeah,
right. So I did that, which was kind of this weird hybrid of work / further education. So I did that for another 2 years. And I kind of viewed that as me getting like my bachelor's. Like,
sure.
I did 2 years of design, 2 years of really intense leadership development.
Yep.
And then after that was when I went to a vehicle wrap signage place, kind of got my gig there.
Yep.
I was there for about 3 years, worked my way up into essentially like a lead designer role where I was, I had a designer above me, but I was also leading some of the new team, teammates in the designer team. Which was really good. It was a good hybrid of like some leadership, some just submission to leadership, which I think is really, really healthy for a young, very ambitious, aspiring designer. I thought I could handle, right? Like when you're young, you're like, I just want to lead. And really it's like you still need to submit to something.
Absolutely.
And then after that, I ended up at a local design agency and then worked there for a couple of years as a senior designer. And then from there, I went out on my own.
So was there like a moment when you were in high school where you're like, was it like this idea of, hey, I got to go to school for something? Or was it like somewhere in there where you're like, I think design's where I want to go?
Yeah. So really what it came down to was I was going to take a year. I took a year off of after high school and I was working as a support staff front desk person. And one of my friends, essentially, so I grew up with a single mom, 3 kids. We grew up on Section 8, government cheese, all that kind of stuff.
Nice.
And so we never had like a ton, but one of the benefits of that, I guess, was that one of my friends who also didn't have a lot of money, he was like, hey, Thaddeus Stevens has what's called the Stevens Grant. And Thaddeus Stevens is the school I went to.
Great school. Yeah.
And so they have a thing called the Stevens Grant. And essentially, if your family or household makes under a certain amount, you get like X amount of your tuition covered for free. It was a lot for me. Like it was almost fully covered. I think I owed a little bit at the end. And I was like, I think Tom Corbett was the governor at the time. Or it wasn't Tom Wolf. It was Governor Corbett. Maybe I thought his first name was Tom.
Before Wolf was Rendell, wasn't it?
Maybe.
I don't know.
No, I think it's Tom Corbett. Yeah.
I was out of state at that
It was Tom
point.
Corbett. So I remember getting to the end of my associate's degree, and I had like a little tiny bill. I'm thinking like it was like $150 or something.
Right.
And I like jokingly went to the front desk at the school, and I was like, I'm not putting up with it. It's like, I'm not paying for this. You better send this back to Tom Corbett. Literally the rest of my tuition was covered.
That's awesome.
I didn't actually do that. I wanted to though. So yeah, you asked.
Well, if there was a moment.
Yeah. So I think it came down to, ironically,
you knew you could go to school and they had a list of things that you could choose and you were like, that's the one.
It was almost fully covered.
Sure.
So that was the motivating thing, was like, man, I can go and get an associate's degree that no one can ever take away from me for a very like affordable price. Yeah. And so design just seemed like, out of what they offered, design was the natural thing for me to get into. And then I went into that program and excelled. I would say like I did amongst all my other peers, like I felt like I was excelling and doing really well amongst them. And so I think there I was like, okay, I have some skill set here. What do I do next with it? And then ironically, I went to a church environment, which utilized something else that was cooking in me for a long time, which was, the communication, leadership, all that sort of stuff that I'm interested in. And then further develop that. And then when I left there, that was when I went to Castle, which is the vehicle wrap signage place. And those things came together.
Sure.
So, I was able to lead and design. And then I ended up in senior designer role. And then I went out on my own.
Very cool.
So not really a moment. It's funny. It wasn't motivated by like design, and I think a lot of people's story might be that. Right. Mine was motivated mostly by like, how can I get a degree for the cheapest? And I just kept excelling in those areas, and it just kept,
When you were in that front desk office support role, did you ever have any opportunities to like inject like
no,
any
not,
sort of
not
design?
there. No,
I
was working at a counseling place, and I would do like Spanish reminder calls. When you have a doctor's appointment coming up and they call you to remind you and stuff. So they would always give me the Spanish ones because I'm Puerto Rican. They'd be like, oh, here's the, can you make these, like call these people?
Ironically, you don't know Spanish. No.
It was TW Panessa.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So
I started off in and just, you do know Spanish. I don't know why I made that joke. But
no, I do know some. No, it's actually, it's pretty bad. I remember the reminder call would be like, hola.
It'd be worse than mine.
Like, hola, es TW Panessa llamando para confirmar la cita para Mitch, Meador, mañana a las 4. And then they'd be like, oh, sí. And then they'd be like, okay, see you tomorrow, bye.
Oh, yeah.
Most of the time they would speak Spanglish. Most Spanish people can like, if you say a couple words in Spanish, they can pick up on it, and it's all kosher.
Well, but in a very similar fashion, when I was in school, I worked, or I should say, I went to school for 2 years. And then I was a rock and roll star, 6,000 MySpace followers. So my band, we decided that we needed to pursue that. But when that inevitably fell apart.
Did you finish your school?
Yeah, I got a bachelor's degree,
Okay. In 2 years?
Yeah. So I went to school for 2 years, and then I went back to school for a year to finish it later.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Oh. So I did like two years of school in a year later, which is a whole other story. Yeah. I was working full time, doing school at night, and newly married or engaged and married. And in that year, that was probably my most productive year of my life, in terms of raw output.
Right.
But anyways, I worked in between, right after my rock and roll dreams fell through. Yeah. I worked briefly, maybe 9 months, for the PA welfare department as a clerk, which was just like a friend of mine's like, hey, they actually pay pretty good money. Like, and all you got to do is like pass this test of like typing and like it's stuff that's like super easy for me anyways, maybe not for everybody.
You were probably signing out checks to my family.
Maybe not me personally.
You're
I was a clerk. So I was like, but like
You were mailing
quickly was identified as like, this guy can do a lot of different stuff.
Yeah, that's
And
cool.
so I was like front desk type roles at times, but like a lot, like I took all the all the paper files and did the digital conversion for everything. And like, just a lot of different stuff that to me was really easy. And I trained on like a bunch of different people's jobs so that like when they were out, I could cover for them. And it was just like, it was a fun 9 months or whatever it was. I think it was 9 months. But the thing that like that kind of, the reason I asked you a question about your front desk job is like, for me, that was like, man, like they're bringing me a lot of stuff and I'm able to handle this. And it just was a real confidence builder for me of like I can do this. Like I have something to offer.
Right.
And previously, not that I didn't feel that, but like I was so into music and like that lane that I never really even gave myself a chance to think about what else I could do career wise. And ultimately marketing was like, oh, this is like left brain, right brain, which is what I needed. I need that creativity, that right brain, but I also need that like structure and business sense that I could get from, from marketing as well. So yeah,
I'm the same way. So like, I think we have a lot of similarities in that way where like neither of us are purely like, I actually enjoy running my business and having those conversations and stuff. Like I actually enjoy that more than the creative work.
Sure.
So the creative work is the means to doing something. Whereas I think a lot of most creatives and designers that I come across, it's usually they live and breathe for that design and living in that and stuff.
Right. Yeah. They just want to spend so much time like tweaking and tweaking and tweaking. Whereas I'm like, how do I do this?
I want to systematize it and then like,
I want to systematize it. I'm good at refining, but I'm not good at like, well, we'll talk about this later with the AI stuff. Like blank page syndrome is real for me. So when I'm developing a system, I just go like, oh man, like that initial lift is the hardest part for me. But once the momentum's there, like I can crank it out. Like even, this podcast outline, like doing that stuff, like I just needed a little bit of help. So I turned to my AI bot friend, who helped me like start it off. And then I took it from there. Like it's all my knowledge, but I just needed like that something to be on the page so that I could change it. So yeah, I mean, how do you strike that balance in your business? Like, that can be tough. And even, we're both fathers and, we have wives that require attention. So how do you kind of strike a balance in your life?
Yeah, I mean, so I think that I try to focus on, I think the question is, how do you have a balance between the creative aspect of the business and the business end of the business?
Yeah, sure. I was thinking more just like work life, but both of those are fascinating to me. So
they're tied to one another because I guess if I'm not doing the things that I want to be doing, my wife ends up hearing about it, unfortunately, and then you end up. She's like, "Can you just stop talking about work?" I think recently I'm very much growing and I'm still in process like everyone else is, but like I'm recently now just really valuing handing stuff off and trying to like in the same way you are, just outsourcing stuff and giving stuff away to having someone else do it and you refine it. And so even with a recent logo project that I took on, it's like someone contracted me to do a project and I found another designer who can do it, and they got it like 75% there, and they sent me their stuff, and like I could have gone back and forth with that person. This is an area where I still need to grow, but I could have gone back and forth with that designer to get it, to where I think it needed to be. But what I ended up doing was like, great, they got it. They came up with the idea. They got it 75% there. I just took it and then I just refined it myself because everything's already there. And then I sent it, to the person, and they loved the options that I came up with. So to me, those transactions and me like conversating with the designer and then talking with the client, those are more business oriented things rather than I'm just behind the computer designing. And so that's helpful to me to try to remove myself from the design while still like being profitable. But specifically as it relates to work-life balance, I think right now, it's funny. People think when you go out on your own in any capacity, starting a business, that you're going to like not have to, like, you end up working more than your average person.
Yes.
I work more than 40 hours a week.
Yes.
I work more than that. It's just sprinkled throughout the day differently for at least right now in this season. So I might pick up my laptop at 8 o'clock at night when the kids are in bed and do another hour of work, and other people can turn off. And so it's all over the place. But we have a newborn. We have a 2-year-old, going to be 3-year-old soon. So I would say right now it is less about balance and more about like priority.
Yep.
Right. And so even talking to you sometimes it's like, hey, I can connect with you at 10. I'll come into the studio around 10.
Right. Well, and I think that's actually an important thing.
Different.
When people talk about work-life balance, they think it's like, I think the way I shouldn't even say they think, I thought at one point that work-life balance meant I need to find that perfect balance that works every day, every week.
Yeah.
When really, it's really more of like an ebb and flow. There are seasons of life where you're like, hey, this is a season where I need to dig in with work. And then there's other times where, hey, this is a season where like my family needs me a little bit more, or maybe because I just went through a work season, I need to like recalibrate and do that. Yeah. And it's you might have moments where you're like, man, I'm in a really good stride right now. But those are fleeting. Yeah. You have to get that. You have to just understand where you're at. And I've told my wife that, and typically I have to remind her when I'm doing it too, is like, hey, I'm in a season right now where like work is a priority. I've got XYZ project, or, like profitability slipping a little bit or whatever it might be. And we have to have that conversation a couple times typically, because she'll be like, you've been working a lot. I'm like, I know, but remember, like this is a season I'm in right now. But like right now I'm in a season where ideally I'm not working as much. My kids are playing t-ball, and that takes 2 nights a week of just the longest 2 hours of my life. It's fun, but I've got a 2-year-old and then the 2 boys that are playing. And like, on Saturday I'm solo parenting, taking them to t-ball practice. So I'll just be chasing the 2-year-old, 3-year-old around.
I know not to text you.
Yeah, it's all good. But that's, and I set boundaries too. Like I don't typically work after I leave the office. Good. Like occasionally I have to log in and do something, but it's very rare. I don't take calls outside of that. There's a couple priority clients. If they text me, I'm willing to text them back, but like I'm not willing to make a work thing. And I also try on Sundays to not even think about work until after like 8 p.m. And then I can kind of start going, all right, what am I doing tomorrow?
Yeah. I think that prioritization versus balance is important, because there's no real balance. It's week to week. Yeah. And it's season to season. And so that's where I'm at.
Cool, man. Let's talk about something else I got on my agenda here. We're going to talk about using AI in work. And I've been doing this more and more. I know you've like dabbled a little bit, and
it's actually I've been using it more in content more than work,
which I actually think, so that's one of the interesting things about AI is there's so many different ways you can use it. And so the ways that I understand are the ways that I already am working and how I can kind of plug it into the work that I'm doing. And I know like I'm not a coder, quote unquote. I'm not a back end developer type. So I don't completely understand that side of it. I know I've heard amazing things about what AI can do with coding. Obviously AI has been around for a while in ways that we don't even really realize. And I've worked with some companies that do artificial intelligence and machine learning in like, supply chain stuff and simulations. And like during COVID, it was like they would do these simulations of like, how many people can we fit in this room? How much do we have to spread them out to, and they would build these like models.
Systems around it.
But what I know is how I'm using it in my business. So I thought I could talk about that. And I alluded to it earlier. One of the main things for me is curing blank page syndrome.
Yeah. Good.
And blank page syndrome, patent pending, is something that I struggle with quite a bit. Is this idea of like, I have a gazillion thoughts, but I don't even know where to start. And so one of the things that I'll do with a tool like ChatGPT. So just to talk about a couple tools I use, ChatGPT is one that I use. I pay for the premium or plus or whatever they call it. I use copy.ai. I've been using that one for about a year. And the reason I use that one is because it's the first one I heard about. I know there's Jasper. I know there's some other ones. There's recently one that I've experimented with called Copy Hoppy, and it's or Hoppy Copy, I don't know, something like that. And the reason I like that one is it's got a bunch of like built-in templates, like email sequences and stuff. It's very much geared towards like email marketing and that kind of stuff. And it's got like, you know, like I want to write a welcome sequence, and you plug in some stuff and it spits out copy. But all of those tools are powered by OpenAI, which is what powers ChatGPT. So the things I'll use it for is like, I'll use it for ideas for topics. Like if I'm doing content, I'll be like, you know, like, all right, give me some ideas for XYZ, and it'll spit it out. And I'll be like, give me 10 more, give me 25 more, give me 50. And it'll do it. I'll use it for articles, keywords for articles. You can even have it write articles and give it keywords to say, put it in the article. I've even seen people, I haven't done it for myself yet, but I've seen people, they'll do it in markdown style where it actually does, you know, like header 1, header 2, and then it can hyperlink, it can do all these things. And it'll essentially, you can just copy and paste directly into your blog if you're daring. I'm not daring. My process, if I'm using it for content creation, like let's say we're doing a blog post, I will actually start with, hey, I want to write an article about this, and I'll tell it a bunch of information that I want to pull from, let it spit out an article outline. I'll say, give me an outline. It'll spit out an outline. I'll be like, no, I don't want this topic. Like here's, you know, I'll refine the outline. And then I'll say, okay, now write the first section, you know, write the intro paragraph. And then I'll refine that. And I'll say, write the next section. I'll refine that. So like, it's an iterative process, but it's speeding up that blank page syndrome. I mean, like I seriously think it's about 10 times, like in terms of output, what the amount of time, like something that for me would probably be something like if I was writing a blog post for my website, it probably sits in an open document for a week on my desktop, just kind of in the background, and I get to it when I can. This, I can churn it out in an hour or two and be very confident and actually post it versus that thing sitting in the back of my desktop, whether or not at the end of the week I get around to posting it, whether it's there yet. There's a graveyard of half written blog posts on my computer. So yeah, that's a pretty fascinating thing.
It's interesting to me how the way you approach it. So you'll have it write something, you'll refine that, give it back to it, and say, now do the second piece. And now, so you're like throughout the whole process interjecting yourself back into it. Which is fun. I think a lot of people are probably just using it and then plug and play. Like I'm going to copy Command C, Command V, right? Like I'm putting that right into my blog. But I think it's important that you're still taking time to make it your own.
Well, it's not even making it your own. It's not smart enough to do to do it well. It can simulate knowledge, you know, and in some topics it's going to come up with something way better than me. But when it comes to my areas of expertise and my own personal philosophies, I have to teach it that as it's going along. And some of the next steps with some of the auto GPTs, which I haven't messed around with yet, which is essentially like being able to have your own installed on your desktop version of Chat GPT, but have it draw from your own knowledge base. Like that's something I would love to do. Is essentially
what does GPT stand for?
That's a good question. I actually want to do a video Yeah, I want to do a video on all the terms because I don't even remember them off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But I have, uh, I actually went on ChatGPT and asked it to do all these things. It's I knew it was generative,
Retrained.
pre-trained.
Retrained. Yeah, okay.
The idea behind GPT,
Generative.
generative pre-trained transformer, is that it's machine learning on a certain set of information. So like ChatGPT 3, I think was on about 700 gigs worth of information. And ChatGPT 4 is many terabytes of information in addition to all of the feedback that comes from human input.
Right.
So every time you say, no, that's not quite it, it's learning and going, oh, this person didn't like the response. And it's teaching not just for working with me, but the model in general, that like, this is how you get it better. We'll talk about that a little bit later on the next topic.
Yeah.
Because I was doing some copywriting for our new business venture that I'm excited about. And I needed to really explain what I was talking about because it kept misinterpreting what I was trying to do. But along those same lines, one of the things that, so that's a good, I need to do a video on the YouTube channel that is, definitions of AI terms, because
if you had like a 5-minute video, literally just ripping through the, because I think people use that,
I need
but they
it
don't
too.
even know. Yeah.
Like obviously you asked me what ChatGPT was and I couldn't pull that out of thin air. I remember generative, but that's as far as I got. And so, but there's a bunch of terms, like what is AI? Like I put in, what is AI? Explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old. And AI, ChatGPT spit out like, imagine you have a robot friend who's really helpful and really smart. like did this whole explain it to him like I'm 5. I'm like, that's exactly how you'd explain it.
I wonder, this is kind of a, I don't know, a rhetorical question, I guess, but like, I wonder if AI right now, the state of AI can be equated to an age. Like what age is AI right now, right? Like let's 10 years from now, 20 years from now, is there a teenage version of AI? And are really what's blowing us out of blowing our minds right now is this like 2-year-old AI. Not literally 2 years old. Obviously AI has been around longer than that, but if we were pretending that it was a living thing, well, are we experiencing like this kind of very toddler-esque version of AI?
Yeah.
And, down the road, we're going to really see how it just, I think it's like, I mean, it's revolutionary, right? Yeah. Like
when I was in like high school and college, computing power would essentially double every year. Yeah. Like the way technology was advancing, it's kind of slowed down a little bit. And also everything's gotten so much more efficient. Like what you can do on 16 gigs of memory, I don't even completely understand why, but 16 gigs of memory is way more powerful than it was in 2006. But it used to be like, 1 year, the 2 gigabyte RAM would come out. The next year be 4, the next year be 8, the next year be 16. And it was like every year and a half, these things were doubling. In the same way, AI is like doubling, but it's doing it in like weeks. Like it's crazy. And like, I do not understand it because what I'm doing with it is some of the most simple stuff out there. When I hear like real AI people talk, like I listen to a lot of AI interviews and stuff. When I hear about the real people doing the work, it's blowing me away. I'm just like, well, I'm just going to stick to what I know because, at 35 years old, I don't have time to learn completely new skill sets. Yeah. But I know marketing and I can use it in my little corner to the best of my abilities. One thing I did recently was actually I've started creating marketing plans. Like when a client comes to me and, we're proposing the work we're going to do for them for the next 6 to 12 months. We'll go in and we'll do a bunch of research, compile a bunch of that research and then kind of like put our strategy together for them. Started using AI as part of that and saying like, give me some, ChatGPT can't access the internet currently unless you use AutoGPT. That's a whole different thing. Or plugins, they're rolling out plugins, but AutoGPT is going to kind of make plugins obsolete because you can install it on your desktop. Anyways, it can't explore the internet. So some of what it does is not like if I say, give me some sites to some example sites to compare this to, or like competitor sites or something like that. It gets some of them right, and then if it doesn't have enough, it'll just make some up.
Yeah.
Like literally, you'll be like, you'll click on the link it gives you, and you're like, this isn't even there's nothing here, and it just made it up. But you can create an entire marketing plan. You can create like pillar content and cluster content around that, which that's a whole different thing. And then, like I said, I usually have it create an article outline, and then I take it from there. Being StoryBrand certified, I created a whole video on it using the StoryBrand framework. It did a pretty good job. Like ChatGPT 3.5 did not do it well, but 4 does it very well, to the point where it's like 80% of the way there. And I'll also use it for little things like writing terms and conditions type stuff for websites, or even like contracts for clients. I will create the draft through there. I'll say like, these are, I'll even start as simple as like, give me a basic website contract, and it'll spit it out, and I'll be like, I need like, and then I know some of the things I need in there. I'll be like, I need a section on XYZ, and it'll add it. So it's really interesting. And
how regularly, like you said, 3.5 to 4, how regularly are those updates coming out?
So 3.
And if you're paying for premium, does that, like, are you automatically brought into the new thing?
That's a good question. I don't know for sure that I'm automatically brought into the new thing. 4 just came out in the past month and a half. 3.5, so they had 3 that had been out for about 2 years, but it was I don't know that it was it wasn't publicly available. They made 3.5 publicly available, essentially to do some more of that learning that comes from feedback from humans. So they're like, let's put this out to the public more. And also OpenAI, that's kind of part of their values, is that they're trying to not do it in secret. Originally it was actually nonprofit, and then now they're like kind of nonprofit, kind of for profit. It's why Elon Musk was really involved in the beginning, and now he doesn't like them. It's a whole thing. I don't know every detail of it, but it's an interesting little drama unfolding.
Yeah. I think he just met with some members of Congress.
Yeah,
talking about AI, which is interesting.
When we went and saw Steve Wozniak speak here locally, he was very concerned, and he signed the like pause AI petition or whatever, which I think I'm not against, as long as they pause it and don't revoke my access, because now I'm kind of hooked.
Yeah, exactly. Now you're on the.
But like, I know some European countries have banned ChatGPT. Like, you can't go, like the URL's banned. I mean, if you have a VPN, you can just access it. Yeah. It's illegal, but only if they catch you. So anyways, that's using AI in my work. I just wanted to put some of that out there because I'm super excited about it. And we're actually starting a newsletter around that. So if you go to brandnerd.ai, if you're listening to this podcast, we will essentially, it's tutorials and tools that just kind of show some of the things that we're doing currently. I've done exactly one video on using AI, but I've got a list of videos that I'd like to get through, including the definitions one. And that is a great kind of like supplement to the podcast, because we won't get into like the nitty gritty on the podcast, but
we'll talk.
Yeah, on that I can. Brandnerd.ai, sign up for more information.
I think it's a great idea. I think people are like, I think people's understanding is probably a little less than what you have, but like more like me. Like I feel like I see it's everywhere, right? Most people see that it's everywhere. They kind of have a grasp on like artificial intelligence. They're like, they know what the gist of it is, but there's so many things that you just like, well, how does that apply in real time? And some actual fields like don't understand how it can be beneficial to them. Right. Like until they're shown, and they're like, their mind will probably be blown, and they're like, whoa, we could do it this way. I think for me, AI just comes into play when it comes to content, and it's really surrounding just captioning videos, literally putting captions on the video, like the words,
right?
And then also
everywhere now.
Also captioning like the social, like what you're actually going to post so the wording. So the app that I use, one of my favorite tools, is the app called Captions. And it's on mobile only, but so I'll create a reel, 60 seconds. I'll upload it to Captions. It generates all those captions for me. And they just came out with a feature a couple of days ago where you can add emojis. It'll automatically add emojis. It'll automatically add photos and video. So like it'll go on a stock site, grab a photo, and if it hears you saying something, it'll add that into your video.
Does it do like a sound effect?
It could, yeah. So there's like automatic sound effects. There's all sorts of stuff. There's eye contact. There's one that's like eye contact. So if your eye drifts off the screen, it can like keep your eye on the screen. I didn't use it yet. I tried it and I thought it actually looked really good, but there's something about it that I was like, this looks like.
Well, there is a threshold for how polished your content can be.
Yeah, this felt so polished,
right,
that it felt off to me.
Right.
And the times where I'm talking, even right now, my eye goes to the corner of the room or whatever. It's just natural. It's how I talk. So this kept my eye on the screen the whole time, but then it just felt so unnatural that I was like, I turned it off. So yeah, AI, that's been AI for me. I have not used it really for like, there's nothing logo design type stuff. Like I'm sure there's people use it maybe like generate ideas or generate a logo or something.
Journey stuff. But it's not, it would be good for ideas. It would not be good for, like, you can't like pull and
export it.
To my knowledge, you can't be like, oh, hey, now give me the AI file. You know what I mean?
Ironically, the AI file.
Right. The Adobe Illustrator file.
AI versus AI.
Yeah.
Can AI output AI?
Like it doesn't shoot a vector; it shoots an
image,
static image
that you can download as a JPEG or something. Yeah. So, man. I mean, I'm all for it. I'm not against it, but
I feel like I told this to my wife a couple weeks ago. I feel like when I'm explaining AI to people that haven't really caught on to it yet, which is most people that I come in contact with, they haven't, like, they'll be like, oh yeah, I've seen that on the news or on the whatever, on the Facebook.
Artificial intelligence. They smell like 3 teeth.
Yeah.
We do live in a pretty like rural.
Yeah, sure.
Like largely speaking, the county is like.
Yeah, it's true. And it's I would say it's conservative. I'm not even speaking politically. I'm speaking like just values, and like everything is approached with caution and like, this is the way we've done it for a long time. Why would we change? Right. And it's been largely beneficial in this area, because this is a very productive, and it's got a lot of resources. You know, like Lancaster County's got. It's one of the agricultural jewels of the country. So it's been very beneficial in this area. But yeah, I feel like when I explain AI to people, it's a lot like 15 years ago when I was explaining podcasts to people. And like I had started listening to podcasts. Remember, I had my family was on Verizon, so I couldn't have an iPod yet, or an iPhone yet. I had the iPod.
They were only with AT&T.
They were only AT&T.
Exclusively.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. When the phone came, when the OG iPhone dropped, it was AT&T Singular. There was a weird like Singular and AT&T were merging, and eventually it became just AT&T. But that limited me, and the price point limited me from getting an iPhone. My first iPhone was an iPhone 5. Anyways, at the time I had a Motorola. You know, I was using Stitcher, which is still around, to listen to podcasts. And I could listen to some of my favorite radio shows that people were turned into podcasts, but I could also listen to some of the early podcasts. Like I remember the WTF podcast with Mark Maron was one I listened to a lot, and he would interview comedians and expanded to other personalities as well. But anyways, I was explaining this to people just right over their heads, you know, like they just did not understand podcasts. And I feel like AI is the same way right now. But the thing is AI is going to take off a lot faster than podcasts. Like podcasts, like slowly over time took off to the point where like now it's probably like 80% adoption or whatever, you know, in our generation's 80% adoption. Then maybe like, you know, older generations, it's 50 or whatever. So yeah,
Dude, there was
I
a
feel like that's
time-
where we're at.
There was a time where we paid for ringtones. I paid like 89 cents or 99 cents for a ringtone, right? Like back in the day. Or I like recorded it myself, right? Like on by the car, press record and whatever. It was janky. But now I cannot stand if I hear the sound of my phone. Like if it goes off, I'm like,
The only time I hear my ringtone is if somebody calls me while my AirPods are in.
yeah.
Then I hear my ringtone.
Oh, I hate auto
Cantina
announce.
theme from Star Wars, so it doesn't bother me.
It's
I
just
love
funny,
it.
man, how culture changes. Like there was a point where you had your phone on loud so that when someone called you or something, like people could hear the ringtone.
Yeah.
Like that was the coolest thing.
Yeah.
You know, when like the chocolate. I remember Verizon had like the phone called the chocolate. I forget who made it.
Totally. Yeah, who made the chocolate? I totally remember that though.
Was it? LG chocolate.
LG chocolate.
Yeah.
All right.
Chocolate. I remember
Devin is the invisible voice in the corner.
Yeah. So I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. Look it up, Devin.
Yeah, look it up. Really quick this is just kind of fun for phones. I think my first phone was the first, it's called the Google G1. I think it was HTC. It was like G1 or something. I think it was the first iteration of what today is the Android, the most popular Android phone. I forget what it's called. The Galaxies.
Oh, okay.
So the G1 was like the first iteration of that. I had T-Mobile. And then I was almost exclusively, do you remember the Sidekicks? T-Mobile Sidekick? And it was the phone that was like this. And when you flicked it went.
Out. Yeah.
That was my speed, dude. It was all like they just marketed.
Well, those are so tactile too. Like that.
Word. Just that feeling.
Like my kids with flip phones now, like we have some like old flip phones around the house. And I mean, my son will just carry that around with him all day because flipping it open, touching the buttons.
Yeah, dude. There was nothing like it. The QWERTY keyboards and like it just felt so good. And then so anyway, ironically, my first iPhone was I think iPhone 5, which is when they went to the squared off sides. Or no, the squared off sides were there, but it was like I remember having a black iPhone. It was all black, and
iPhone 5 was the first elongated screen.
Yes. Yep.
So it was the same form factor as the 4 in terms of like the metal band, like the squared off. It's actually a lot like the phones they make now, minus the big camera bump. Yeah. But then they elongated it, and that was the first one that was available on any network. So I got it. I mean, like literally stayed up till.
Did you get all black, the black one?
I think it released at midnight Pacific time or whatever. Yep. So like set an alarm or stayed up. I don't remember which one and ordered it.
Yeah. Did you get the black one?
Yeah. I have the teardown now, that frame teardown over at my desk.
Nice.
Because
that was my first iPhone too, which is crazy.
A moment for me. And it was delivered to the place I was working. I had it delivered to work because I knew it would come in the middle of the day. I didn't want it to go home and not sign for it. So I had it delivered to work. And like they announced it over the loudspeaker to me because they knew how jazzed I was. So like, Mitch, your iPhone's in. And like people gathered around while I opened it.
You're walking to the front desk and you're just like, people are high-fiving you and like
I was known as an Apple nerd even back then. So
I went from Apple iPhone 5, and then I think I jumped to the 6, and then I skipped 7. I did 8, and then I went from 8 to 10 because 10 was the big. That was the jump to the all screen. That was there was no 9. There was no 9. It just
the
went
iPhone
8.
X.
Yeah, iPhone X. So the iPhone 10. I had the 10, and then I did 12. I skipped the 11, went to 12, and then I jumped to 13, and I skipped the 14. Now I'm gonna get the 15 this year. So historically, I've been on every other year cycle.
Yeah, that's usually what I did. I actually went 3 years before I got the iPhone 13. I went from 10 to 13.
I just love, like, I saw some leaked, and we can keep going, but I saw some leaked photos of the iPhone 15, and
we'll see. Yeah,
and I just like
I actually am considering going back down to the mini. I never had the mini, but like I kind of like now I'm like anti.
Yeah.
Like I've got like my phone is on lockdown. Like I can't get on any social media during the day, anything. Yeah. I just don't want to be distracted. I want to be in the moment and I want to be productive. So.
All right. Anyway, sorry. I derailed this time off. We could get into some Apple stuff later on though in the podcast. Not today. I'm saying like future episodes.
Dude, next time they do like product launches and stuff, we're in. Yeah.
We're talking about it. So
maybe
stay
we'll
tuned
live
for that,
stream.
guys.
All right. So, new business venture. This is something I'm particularly stoked out of my mind about. All right. So we bought all this cool podcast gear, and it's crazy how affordable it is, for one thing. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, we spent plenty of money getting some midline gear in the podcast studio, but like, I love podcasts. I love listening to them. I actually worked many years in the audio industry, so like live sound production, and so I'm just super nerdy about all this stuff. So we're buying all this gear, and I'm like, why is there not a podcast studio in Lancaster? And like I looked it up. There's nothing. I mean, there's some recording studios that'll do podcasts, but to my knowledge, there is not a podcast studio in Lancaster County, which should have something like that available. So the new business venture is
starting a podcast studio.
Yeah,
let's go. You guys think all this stuff, oh, business, how do I figure it out? Oh, what do I, what's the next big idea? When you think about something, you Google it, and even if there's just one existing, because they have a monopoly if there's just one. But if there's nothing, fill the space.
Right.
Occupy the space.
Yeah. And how many people do you know? We should do a podcast about that, or we should, you know what I mean? And but the barrier to entry, and especially the barrier to something of high enough quality to feel like it represents you. Like, if a business wants to start a podcast and they just buy 2 mics and sit in their conference room with fluorescent lighting and a handy cam, like, they're not, or webcam or whatever, they're not going to have the production value that feels like it's their brand. I don't think that should stop them.
Right.
But this is an option where you can come in and rent the studio for an hour or two and walk out that day, have a file delivered to you with your done for you podcast.
One of the things, I think you're spot on. Content is king. And when I say, I know we've all heard that content is king, but people have used that in the past for like just putting stuff out is king, right? That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying what you're saying is actually king, right? It's more critical. So you could have a fuzzy video and fuzzy audio, and if you're saying really, really good stuff, people will still listen to you.
Yeah.
However, one of my favorite things that Omar El Tukuri from Think Media talks about is that everything about you are a brand.
Shout out Think Media.
Shout out to Think Media.
Check them out on YouTube.
Yes, they're an incredible resource for creators. But he says you are a brand. Everything about you is a brand. So the way you show up on camera is your brand, right? The way you're dressed is your brand. I mean, your glasses, all right? That's integrated into the brand nerd culture.
We had to redesign the logo when I switched glasses.
Exactly. When you switch glasses, we literally changed the brand.
Yeah.
So I think about that even today. This morning, I was conscious of, what am I wearing today, and does that align with kind of like, my brand? Now, you can become over obsessed with that. I'm not saying to like be compulsive about that in an unhealthy way, but just to be mindful of, does your video and audio match the level of excellence that you are putting out? And it's true that people could have great audio and video and not really great content, but if you can consider both and master both.
One of the things that we talk about in live production is, so if you're behind the scenes, like I've run live sound for a lot of concerts and church services and things of that nature. One of the things that we say is your job is to not be noticed. So whenever you've probably been at a concert or a church service or something when like a mic isn't on in time for the person who starts speaking, or the video starts playing but there's no audio, or the audio is really low, or the audio is really loud, or your job is to not be noticed. Right. So the nice thing, that's production level. So the nice thing about like coming to a podcast studio that can help take away some of those things that people are going to notice that distract from what you're saying. Yep. So, if you've got grainy footage, or you've got poor lighting, or you've got bad audio, that all distracts from what you're saying. And what's cool about this podcast, if somebody watches our first episode, second episode, now third episode, or they're gonna see a progression of how quickly this is ramping up in production value.
Yeah. I was thinking, as you just announced that kind of officially, that you could charge it by the hour, right? And do different packages, which you've already done. But my mind just went to, dude, what if you took this podcast studio and made it subscription based? Like what, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, rather than paying X amount per visit, like, is there a way to even structure the packages, like have an hourly package, but then also have a subscription package where it's like you have access, you have X amount of hours per month based on this price point.
Yeah.
But you have to be locked in for part of the contingency is that you lock them in for 6 months or a year.
Right.
And it's like, that might even be.
So that is there.
That is there.
The
Okay.
pricing that's on the website is based on a 12 episode run.
Okay.
So essentially you buy 12 episodes at that hourly rate.
Gotcha.
So if you would just say, hey, we just want to do one episode, that would be a different rate.
Right. Okay. Understood.
And that's just, there's built-in efficiencies from working with somebody over time.
Yep.
And I think one of the things that we can be really flexible right now, like I want to see what is interesting to businesses, because for example, I was watching, I've consumed some content around this. There's not a lot of people that have podcast studios, but one of the people was saying, hey, we have a $5,000 a month done for you podcast bundle. We do all your artwork, your music, we edit, we create shorter form content out of your podcast, all of it done for you. It's just $5,000 a month. And I was going, I don't know many businesses that are going to pay $5,000 a month for a package like that. Yeah. I mean, maybe there's some, don't get me wrong. Maybe there's some, and certainly, like some of this is going to be hobbyists or people who kind of want to do this on the side. Right. Like I can't, like some people have money, they have cash to spend, but I don't think that's a reasonable starting point. I mean, that's kind of the high end. And I think we can do that. I know we can do that. Literally, we would just be doing what we're doing for our podcast. But that's always the way I've done business is I find something that works for my business and then I sell it to other people. So podcasting, that's exactly what this is. This is something that I'm investing in for my business. We're doing it the right way. We're doing it high quality, but we can also do that for other businesses and they can come in and just steal our playbook.
Well, I could see even like, even the idea of doing a pod, like I could see businesses utilizing this format for even training videos. Like, I don't know why I'm thinking of like
somebody coming in to do a conference call.
Really?
They're doing a conference call, but it's going to be recorded in a podcast form. They're doing like a virtual interview. And the people that they're doing the interview with like, well, can you go to a studio and record it so that we get the good audio from this versus just your phone? We've all listened to a podcast with the call-in audio and it's choppy and it's obviously an AirPod or a iPhone or God forbid a Android.
We're loyalists.
Green bubble. No,
I could totally see.
I get some of y'all are poor. That's all.
Exactly. No, I get it.
Maybe not poor financially, but poor in spirit.
Poor in taste as well. I could see someone using that for like a training video or a coaching call. Yeah. Right. Like, which is essentially what you're saying, but like so many different use cases. I mean, even if you're a YouTuber and you just want to sit in front of do a floating head, talking head video, you could do that, right? Like we could put this mic here, set you up behind the wall, and like you could record that with great.
Don't even get me started on like what this could be. Like I already have it in my head where like we have like 4 different sets where people can just come in, and one of them's a talking head set, one of them's and by talking head, I mean just like one person looking down the barrel of a camera. I definitely see that in the future. For now, what we have is exactly what you're seeing here. Plus, I'm sure every episode's going to look a little different until we get.
I think there's some big, medium to big size businesses. I'm thinking like the hospitals, right? Like I'm thinking, I don't know why Kreider Farms keeps coming to mind, but it's a local that they're big enough. But I could totally see them doing like an internal podcast for their employees that's quick.
Yeah.
Like, hey, today you can tune into the whatever podcast, and it's only 5 to 10 minutes.
Right.
And we're just going to talk to you about our culture and our values.
Right.
So rather than us needing to pull the entire company together, it's like we can create a 10-part series that we want the whole company to listen to. Like, what if you got, instead of getting handed an employee handbook, what if you were handed a pod? And, you know, and they were like, hey, there's 12 episodes on here.
Right.
They're each 5 to 10 minutes. Can you listen to them on the way home and consume that content? Like, thinking differently about the way you're engaging your employees. Like, that would be cool.
Yeah. I even think it would be cool to have a portable setup, because so when you're thinking like an entrepreneur, you're thinking about what are the obstacles that people have to overcome. And sometimes you can get super distracted by that, and that's not good. But I do think that's a legitimate obstacle. Is some people are like, well, weekly, if it's for a business, I don't have the time to drive to your studio, you know, be there for an hour and then drive back, or whatever that might look like. You know, so my first thought was like, well, maybe we could be open weekends or something. Like they could do it, you know, we could do it like a evening session type thing. But the other option too is actually a portable setup. Like, this is a fairly portable setup, and we could systematize it so that it could be even more portable. And then, then obviously there'd be a premium for it, but we can come to you, and, you know, you can find a wall with your logo in the back, or you can find a dark corner where we can light it really nicely, or whatever, you know, whatever it might be, and do it on site and get that same production value on site.
Yeah, I just think with video, man, it starts to become like there's endless opportunities.
Yeah.
There's endless opportunities. Like, I could even see a CEO doing a talking head video, just like a welcome video. Like, you get hired. Like, how cool would it be if you got hired from a company and you got a video sent to you just saying hi and welcome. And like, we're so glad you're here. It wasn't like a bunch of stuff, but you know, just thinking of different ways to, again, engage.
You know who Gary Vee is?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
I figured you did.
Stupid question.
Every now and then I ask people and they're like, no, who's that? And I'm like, okay. But there's a lot of things that Gary does and says that to me are too extreme, you know? But I think his heart's in the right place, and it's what he's doing. Like, he is Mr. Hustle, you know, do a gazillion things.
Right.
For me, I couldn't do that. But one of the things he says that I think is brilliant is that every company should view themselves as a media company that happens to sell a product in terms of the content that you're creating. Like, and that really is how the best brands in the world grow, is they have an attraction through media, their media, whether it's video, audio, or images. And people find them, they consume them. I mean, we have personalities, personal brands, talking personalities and stuff that just podcast or YouTube and then sell products off of that. You know, they've got food products or alcohol products or all these different things, and it's a new monetization strategy for them to actually launch products on top of their media company. So I just think it's one of those things that companies really need to consider. I don't know that it's an adapt or die type scenario, like maybe AI is eventually. But I do think it's super important. And when you combine the two, AI and this into your content creation like we're doing, it's just that next level superpower. But so anyways, the podcast studio. Let's talk about let's get into a little bit of that. Currently it's just literally I'm calling it podcast studio at the Brand Nerd, or at Brand Nerd. Like
there's no name or brand.
I didn't create a new brand for it. I use the same brand guidelines as the company. It's a page on the website, you know, like, you know, I have a company that does branding and websites and content marketing. It's just another service is the podcast studio. I could see it being kind of its own standalone service as well. Its own logo, its own name, you know. But for now, that's not what it is. So, but what I've done so far with it, I think it'd be interesting just for people to follow along on this journey. I know I love business journeys. We have not booked a single paying guest or customer. All I've done though is talk about it on this podcast and post that one picture and talk to a couple friends. I did say we have somebody coming in to do an interview, I think it's either a podcast interview or some sort of interview where they need a good audio, and that's just a friend who was over for dinner and said, "Do you know a place where I could do this?" And I said, "Actually, I do."
Yeah.
So
Cool.
come on over.
Yeah. Be a good test run too.
And I created a landing page. I used AI to write the copy. And so it was really fascinating going, I'm starting a podcast studio and I want you to write some compelling copy to tell people why they should come to my podcast studio. Okay. And the first thing it did was, all right, if you're going to do a podcast, here are some ideas for podcasting. I'm like, no. This is a podcast studio. Yep. And it's like, okay, here's some equipment for your podcast studio. I'm like, no. Yeah. Have the equipment. It's not a podcast. It's a place where people come to record their podcast. It's a podcast studio. And then it nailed it. Yeah. It's like, and it was funny because like the transcript, like you see it and the transcript is like, oh, now I understand. Yeah. You're doing a podcast studio where people come to record their podcast.
Right.
Yes, exactly. So I actually used it to write the copy. And then I said, what should I charge for this? And I said, can you write me some packages that I should include for this? And it literally, like I modified all of them, but it was, again, the blank page syndrome. Like it spit out exactly what I needed to get it to where I actually wanted it to be.
Right.
So yeah, super, super awesome.
That's awesome.
Using AI. And I mean, like from a marketing perspective, there's still some things to do. Yeah. We got to get the word out there. One of the things I always like to do with my website is have a lead gen of some sort, something people can download. So we'll create some sort of like podcast starter guide or something that they can grab on the website and start building out an email list for the studio. And then a content marketing plan specifically for the studio. Yeah. That's just, obviously it can piggyback on a lot of what we're doing here, which is awesome. Right. But starting to get the word out. Like,
even just to clarify too, we do want to make this a segment of future episodes. So we're kind of going to give intentional check-ins. Hey, here's where we're at with it. We booked one person. Like, what? Yeah, that's crazy.
Exactly.
And hopefully, by a couple episodes, not a couple, but like maybe 10 to 20 episodes in, we've got a couple people booked, and awesome.
Yeah, and I haven't really decided. I don't know that I'm going to do any paid ads or anything just yet. I think I'm just going to let it kind of simmer because we don't need, like, it's not like, it's not like we've bought $1 million worth of gear and the bill's coming due soon. It's everything's bought and paid for, but it would be great to make it back and then some. Yeah. And I just think this is a need. Like, businesses need to be doing this. If we can make it easier from them and we can make it affordable for them and deliver really high value, then it's a no-brainer.
Right. And even mentioning to your current clients too, I think could be beneficial.
Absolutely.
Like as you're talking to them about different things that you offer, you can just like pepper that in
I only a few of my clients are here local that could like show up and do it. But that's definitely part of the plan. Yeah. Before we sign off, I just want to send you, the listener, tactical tutorials and tools for using AI to superpower your brand, website, and content marketing efforts. It is insane what you can do with AI. You can literally 10 times your strategy and output. So head to brandnerd.ai and sign up to get this delivered straight to your email inbox. This is different than the content on the podcast, so you don't want to miss out. And if you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. We really appreciate your support, and it helps us grow this podcast. From me and Pete, that's a wrap,
sir,
for today's Brand Nerd podcast. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to nerding out with you again on the next episode. Until then, stay curious. Have a great week.
Peace.